Will there be a third stimulus check? Now that President Biden and the Democrats are in charge of both houses of Congress, we could see a third recovery rebate payment.
Yeah, the amount of that third check is unclear. It could be either $1,400 or $2,000, or it could even be $2,000 every month until the pandemic is over.
Everything is on the table right now. In this stimulus check update video, we share the latest on your chance for a third stimulus check. Now, there's been a lot of talk in Washington, D.C. over the Biden American Rescue Plan since it was released in mid-January. Biden's coronavirus stimulus plan calls for sending a third stimulus payment in the amount of $1,400 to every American who qualifies.
Yeah, but what's not clear is whether or not lawmakers will be willing to foot the cost of a third round of checks. Many Republicans do not approve of the sizable $1.9 trillion price tag accompanying Biden's plan. Biden's going big, but that doesn't mean he'll be able to bring home the win for working families.
And it's not just Republicans that don't like Biden's plan, John. Progressive Democrats like AOC and Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey want more money for working Americans. Cori Bush and AOC want to send $2,000 checks to every American who qualifies. And Ed Markey wants the Biden stimulus package to include a $2,000 monthly stimulus payment.
Yeah, it's really very difficult to see the Republicans or even all Democrats voting for that. Biden has said that the $600 payments Americans received as part of the second stimulus package a few weeks ago were a down payment on the $2,000 checks that President Trump called for near the end of last year. A new poll from Data for Progress shows that the majority of Americans agree with Ed Markey. 65% of us want the government to provide $2,000 monthly stimulus checks as a part of a third stimulus package.
Yeah, and those checks would go on monthly until the pandemic's over. And with no end in sight, really, what's most likely? And when are we going to get a third recovery rebate check? And who will qualify?
Let's tackle those questions in order. While we don't know for sure, Biden does seem to be taking a middle-of-the-road approach, which makes the $1,400 check most likely to be passed. That is what he put in his plan and is what has the best chance of gaining support from Republicans. A larger check for $2,000, while nice, isn't very likely to happen. Monthly checks in that amount seem impossible. If the $1,400 amount is approved, it would mean up to $1,400 for qualifying individuals, $2,800 for qualifying couples who file a joint tax return, $1,400 for each dependent child under the age of 17, and a new $2,000 amount for qualifying adult dependents. Now, adult dependents weren't included in the second round of stimulus payments, but Biden wants them included, so there's a chance that they could be.
Yeah, so let's assume that the third economic impact payment is for $1,400. When will we get it? Biden's stimulus package calls for a lot more than $1,400 checks, and all those other things are going to be sticking points for Republicans. There's likely going to be weeks of legislating before we see checks. Extended unemployment aid is set to run out in March, so that could provide a deadline for Congress to try to act by. And realistically, that could unfortunately be when we see a third check. And we certainly hope it's sooner than that, but writing and passing legislation takes time.
Exactly, and there are a lot of Democrats that are going to want to wait for the February jobs report to come out before passing another round of aid. Now, that report will come out in the next week or so. If it shows unemployment figures getting worse, that would support the Democrats' argument for bigger spending.
So let's assume for now that $1,400 checks are approved in early March. Past stimulus checks were deposited within 2 weeks for most who qualified to receive them. That means we could get a third recovery rebate check 2 weeks after the funding is approved by lawmakers. But that will require cooperation and compromise from politicians, two things that they have been completely able to do for years.
Exactly, Nicole. I think there's a greater chance of seeing pigs fly. Maybe that's just me. But let's move on to our third question. Who will qualify to receive the third round of economic recovery rebate checks? Well, like so many other things, it depends. If the criteria remains the same as the $600 checks sent out a few weeks ago, the income eligibility requirements would stay the same. Payments would gradually reduce for those with adjusted gross income of more than $75,000 for single tax filers with no dependents and $150,000 for married couples without dependents. If you filed head of household, the reductions begin at $112,500. The phase-out thresholds would change depending on the number of dependents in your household. Eligibility would most likely be based on your most recent tax return. For the second checks, the IRS used the 2019 tax returns. While it sounds confusing, the bottom line is that the third economic impact payment could be a huge help for those of us who are hurting the most.
You know, it sounds confusing because it is confusing. We link to a calculator from Forbes below that will help you see how much money you can get in just a few seconds. We did it and were able to see that our family of 5 could qualify for just over $4,000 total. But your situation could be different. You could get double that or half. Try the calculator to see what you might be able to expect.
Okay, now we've talked a lot about the potential third stimulus check, but there's a lot more in Biden's plan. Let's quickly cover the highlights. The Biden plan would raise supplemental unemployment aid from $300 to $400 per week through September. It also calls for $100 billion for COVID testing and vaccinations. This would help cities get people vaccinated and help us begin to turn the tide on this virus that has ruined our lives for the past year.
It also calls for $350 billion in aid for states and cities. And Republicans really don't like this provision, and it seems unlikely that they would pass it. Some aid might be given to states, but probably not all that Biden is asking for. Another provision that seems unlikely to pass is Biden's call for $170 billion for schools.
Yeah, it's really difficult to see that one passing, but there's $50 billion in Biden's plan for small businesses, and that seems like it could pass. Another provision likely to pass is middle and low income tax credits. Republicans love a good tax cut, so we could probably consider that one done.
Yep, and there are other provisions, but much of it will shake out in the coming weeks. We will all just have to wait and see. But while we're waiting, we don't have to be passive. We know many people, and maybe even you, are in dire straits right now. And while we would really like to see our government do the right thing and get money into people's hands right now, that likely won't happen. But we don't want to leave you on an unhopeful note. We want to empower you to take control of your financial situation. And that starts with thinking about what you can do right now to make more money.
If you're unemployed and need cash now, there are some steps you can take to bring in some extra cash. Delivery app gigs like DoorDash and Postmates are a great way to earn extra income. We have a video on the best delivery service jobs to make money, so please watch that.
If you need money right now to make ends meet, but you don't have a car, and you need ideas of things you can do to make some extra cash from home, watch our video on ways to make money from home during COVID. Now, we'll update you again as soon as we know something more on the stimulus check front. Until then, be safe, be well, and thanks for watching. Let us know what questions you have in the comments below, and please tell us how you're making ends meet right now.
If you haven't already, smash that red subscribe button so you can be notified of all our new content, and we'll see you in our next video.